You'll find some of this interesting, and I'd sure love to find people who might want to talk about what I've been researching. This project is like that. So I've been working on this project. This is the base project. It's called Systems Countercultures, and I just gave it this spiffy subtitle, An Ecology of Outlaw Cybernetics. So this is, well, it's literature and science, which is what I do. It's also cultural science studies. It's history of science, and perhaps at least I aspire to drawing some philosophical conclusions when all is said and done. In any event, so there's this thing called the systems counterculture that I tune into. Group of seminal scientific thinkers whose development of cybernetic ideas lead them beyond the mainstream in one way or another. So the arc I'm going to try to fit into my 10 minutes is this kind of, to draw a picture of this systems counterculture, which then, but gradually as we come to the present, is being mainstreamed and is now, I mean, has this, but there's still this kind of wobble between sort of ideas that are not, well, that are in this limbo between the counterculture and the mainstream. So, but where does it all start? It starts with the Whole Earth Catalog. I mean, you got to start somewhere. So this is an amazing publication. I've published a couple articles on it that I reference here. Begins in 1968. It is sort of the countercultural Bible of that moment. And it has all kinds of content, but it goes through all these iterations by which it keeps expanding and adding content. But every iteration begins with a section called Understanding Whole Systems. So that's the systems theoretical or the cybernetic element that's my particular interest. Just very quickly, the sort of guru at the beginning of the Whole Earth Catalog is Bucky Fuller, an amazing and nomadic thinker who's still, I mean, there's a Bucky Fuller Institute that's still going strong. Eventually, Gregory Bateson steps into the role, becomes a new kind of more ecological guru, or main sort of, primary inspirational thinker for the group around the Whole Earth Catalog, Stuart Brand, and the ecological types that are part of his operation. And then, so, after several years of expansion and iteration, the Whole Earth Catalog takes a pause, but the thought, the systems thinking going on in it gets picked up by the Coevolution Quarterly, which is in its own right an amazing body of countercultural thought, but full of fabulous scientific content as well. 10 years later, this turns into the Whole Earth Review and becomes kind of the Bible of the rise of the personal computer and digital culture. But for the span of the Coevolution Quarterly, it's really ecological systems thinking that's, I think, the crucial contribution going on here. And 1 year later, from the beginning of the Coevolution Quarterly, we get the first popular publication of the Gaia hypothesis by Margulis and Lovelock. There's been a few articles. Their collaboration began a couple of years earlier. There have been articles in rather obscure technical scientific journals. But this is the point at which the Gaia hypothesis kind of lands on the agenda of the counterculture and all the folks that might associate themselves with radical ecological thinking. And here's how the essay begins. It's main authored by Margulis, and one of the points I think is important to gather up what's really important about the development of Gaian discourse is that Lovelock and Margulis are different kinds of thinkers. So when Margulis is the author out front, you get much more of a biological, biospherical orientation. You'll notice here that in an early moment of the Gaian hypothesis, it's really a modest theory about the atmosphere. It isn't sort of the whole enchilada theory of Gaia that develops. Anyways, there they are. Lovelock is a sort of straightforward, technically oriented cyberneticist. He's an atmospheric chemist by training. And just this snippet that I've highlighted here gives you a taste of the cybernetic flavor of the way Lovelock presents the Gaia hypothesis. The purpose of this paper simply present our reasons for believing the atmosphere is actively controlled. Okay, and that's of course the great issue about what is the level of self-regulation that emerges from the Gaian system as a whole. And now, I'm gonna hit you with a very cool clip, but this is now, this is the planetary immunity of Mars.
Geologists use changes in fossils to date the history of the world, and the record shows that mass extinctions have happened repeatedly. Is this a failure of Gaia? Or has life been under attack from the outside and survived? The answer may lie in the large craters scattered around the Earth's surface. One popular, though controversial, theory holds that they were caused by asteroids or comets hitting the Earth. The effect of an impact great enough to cause such craters would be devastating. It's calculated that the shock would be 1,000 times that of all the world's nuclear weapons going off in one place. The effect would be to throw up a blanket of dirt and debris, which would circulate around the world, blocking out the sun, freezing the continental areas, killing most plants and animals. How could the Gaian system have survived such a devastating blow?
Gaia is run by the sum of the biota, and therefore you can lose enormous numbers and great diversity with mass extinctions, but you never come anywhere near losing everything. And you certainly don't lose the major groups of bacteria ever. They've been in continuous existence, and we think it's the major groups of bacteria that actually are running the Gaian system. So in a sense, these, whether they're caused by impact or whatever they're caused by, these great extinctions are tests of Gaia, and the system bounces back.
So that's the Gaian system. Margulis is, I mean, that's the thing I think one really needs to recognize to get to the strong Gaian discourse is that it's systems theoretical, it's applied cybernetics. The Gaian system here is presented as being run by the biota, and that dovetails with Lovelock's control vocabulary. Now, let me really kind of quickly, but what emerges in sort of the variants, and there are all kinds of wild variants of Gaian discourse, but you've basically got the Lovelock variant that is transmitted here by Stuart Brand's note, right? Gaia is a highly sophisticated buffering device by the totality of Earth. The whole Earth may function as a single self-regulating organism, and that's usually the soundbite about Gaia. But here's the Margulisian spin that develops in her presentations of the Gaian idea. In a nutshell, Gaia is symbiosis seen from space, and that's really the more fertile way, as I'll try to very quickly show, just by tracking a bit of Margulis' science. This is her main science, this is her mainstream textbook. Symbiosis is the idea that she's identified with. And within this textbook, there's the lichen is presented as an example of non-obligatory symbiosis as two different phyla of autopoietic entities, the fungus and the alga, merge into this lichen form for which Margulis, if I'm not mistaken, herself coined the term the holobiont. Okay, and this is in the early 90s, but this is now a term that has become more prominent as as our new understanding of symbiosis has unfolded from our ability now to basically get down and genetically sample and work out the genetic analyses of the microbiota, and allowing for a kind of ecological or ecosystemic view of organisms, right, which now shift focus from a kind of traditional emphasis on the individual. We have never been individuals. In fact, we are all holobionts. The term integrated that describes the integrated organism comprised of both host elements and persistent population of symbionts. So we see the concept of the holobiont being developed in some recent articles in the biological sciences, and in the midst of this, the immune system steps forward as itself crucially emergent from the integration of the host and the microbial symbiotic populations here. So these folks, Bosch and McFall and Nagai, state the paradigm that the adaptive immune system has evolved to control microbes. It's been modified by the concept that the immune system is in fact controlled by microorganisms. Well, you know, that's exactly what Margulis said about Gaia altogether, that it's run by the biota. And that's just to remind you of her statement back in the mid-80s. We think it's the major groups of bacteria that are actually running the Gaian system. Now, if we go back to the sort of countercultural development of Gaian thought, it's a very interesting book, but in the midst of which this Thompson just kind of lays that idea out directly. Gaia, in essence, is the immune system of our planet. So to finish up, I'm now going to try to just make some basic points of where I think we're at as these Gaian ideas have sort of been reabsorbed into the new symbiotic thinking. So what I would say is that it's just not right to say that Gaia has functioned as a single organism, unless that's just a shorthand for saying Gaia is a system, has systematicity by which subsystems are coupled to environmental affordances. But in any event, it seems to me it's rather Gaia, the concept of Gaia, could now be described as the integrated system that emerges as the operational summation of terrestrial symbioses coupled to environmental matrices. And so, let me just offer, if we think of Gaia itself as a sort of summation of, or as the autopoietic entity that emerges from the coupling of life as an autopoietic process, Gaia is now observable through an ecosystemic understanding of symbiotic regimes, and it may be thought of as the planetary holobiont. And let me just, okay, now before all the questions come in 2012, we had a symposium here at Tech that Margulis was supposed to be the main speaker at. I met her here at Tech in 2005 when the Horn professors brought her in, struck up a relationship. Unfortunately, Margulis died in 2011, couldn't be here. Her son Dorian Sagan came and we had the symposium, and the book developed from that symposium right here at Texas Tech University is now out, called Life, Earth, Life and System, Evolution and Ecology on a Gaian Planet. Please go to Amazon and get yourself. Thanks,
We
people.
have time for 2 questions.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a number of, physics principles that underlie all of this. Does, this ideology viewpoint take this into consideration? I mean, there's a lot of physical constants that allow the functioning of our system. So what is said about their origin and why they are the right?
Well, Lovelock is, of the two, Lovelock is the one who conceptualizes Gaia in its thermodynamic parameters. I mean, the sun is driving, so there's, that's a kind of ecosystem ecology connection to the energy budgets. I mean, that if I'm understanding your question, that's the level at which the physical parameters of the terrestrial and solar systemic environment, driven by, driven by the sun falling onto the phenomenon of the emergence and evolution of life on Earth. That's where but those aspects of the total equation don't precisely account for the thesis of self-regulation.
Well, I guess my question was more of the fundamental physics, like the universal gravitational constant, the strong forces, nuclear forces, the values of those, relationship between all those fundamental constants. How are those accounted for in this overall?
I would have no idea. I feel I've got somewhat of a handle on the ecological and biological content of these ideas, but fundamental physical constants, I wouldn't know where to.
Any more questions?